So Shabbat Shalom, everyone here in the sanctuary, everyone at home. Shabbat Shalom for joining us for the penultimate, the last service of this month of Av before we move into Elul and the proper preparation for the High Holy Day season. We're service number 2, page 112. As we begin our service offering Matovu as always, and I invite those of you at home to transform your living rooms, your kitchens, into a place of prayer as we are doing here in our small sanctuary with a small intimate crowd of us here. Matovu, page 112. I thought as we're here this morning praying to be reminded of this week's Torah portion reminds us of the ideal to give Jewishly, whether you are flush and able to give a tremendous amount or not, to be able to give. And I wanted to share with you the words of John Rayner, who suggests that giving is greater than all sacrifices and doing kind deeds is greater than doing. From this conception of giving, many things follow. I'm on page 338 if you'd like to follow. All must give, even those who are themselves in need of help. They must give willingly, not grudgingly. They must give as far as possible anonymously. The The self-respect of the recipient must be protected, and the funds raised must be used wisely. And we're reminded of the line from the Mishnah, Al Shlosha Devarim Ha'olam Omed. On three things the world stands. Al HaTorah, on learning. Al HaAvodah, on worship and prayer. Ve'al Gemilut Hasadim, and on loving deeds. We're on page 113 as we allow ourselves to enter the day and our soul as Jewish. The reunion of our soul and our body every morning we mark with the words Elohai neshama shenatata bi. My God, the soul you have given me is pure. Baruch atah Adonai asher biyado nefesh kol chai v'ruach kol basar ish. We're on page 113. Baruch shama v'haya ha'olam baruch hu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam hamchulal b'fi amo meshubach umfa'al b'shon chasidav v'avadav b'shvachot u'vizmorot negadelcha v'namlichecha malkeinu yachid chei ha'olamim Baruch atah Adonai melech mechulal b'tishbachot. We move now straight over to the top of page 116. May the words of our mouths, the meditations of our hearts, be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Stand for the Yishtabach.
Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkeinu Ha'el HaMelech HaGadol VaHaKadosh B'Shamayim U'Ba'aretz Ki Lecha Na'eh Adonai Eloheinu V'Elohei Avoteinu Shir U'Shvacha Halel V'Zimra Brachot V'Hodaot Me'ata Ve'ad Olam Baruch atah Adonai Habocher V'Shirei Zimra.
Page 135.
Et Adonai
if you like, before the Shema, stay standing, whatever suits. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, yotzei or uvorei choshech, oseh shalom uvorei et hakol, hame'eh la'aretz v'ledarim aleha barachamim, uvtuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh v'reishit, ma rabu ma'asecha Adonai, kulam b'chochma asita, mela ha'aretz kinyanecha, titbarach Adonai Eloheinu al shevach ma'aseh yadecha, ve'al morei or she'asita, yofarucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai, yotzer hamorot. Ahava rabbah haftanu, Adonai Eloheinu, chemla gedola v'yitera chamalta aleinu. Avinu malkeinu ba'avor avotenu, shebatchu v'cha v'talmidem chukei chayim ken techanenu talmidenu, v'tem b'libenu, lahavinu, lahaskil, lishmoa, lilmod ulelamed, לשמור ולעשות ולקיים את כל דברי תורתך באהבה, והאר עינינו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחד לבבנו לאהבה וליראה את שמך, כי בנו בחרת ליחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני, הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. Before we join Dean in singing, which we're able to now, singing Shema, let's say these first few words inscribed on our hearts. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed. Le'olam Va'ed.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך, בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה, אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשופך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
So I offer the words of Rabbi Israel Matuk to capture the idea of truth. But first I would like to share words by Rabbi Liu Beck. Every people is a question which God addresses to humanity, and every people from its place with its special talents and possibilities must answer for its own sake and for the sake of humanity. Through its prophets, its teachers, its righteous ones, Israel was able to learn how to listen to the question which God addressed to it, which we still do to this day. Truth, Israel Matek reminded us as we respond to the words of the Shema. Truth is not the best loved of virtues, and yet it is one of the noblest, as it is perhaps the hardest of them all. It needs courage and resolution and strength of will. It must be loved for its own sake, or it will not be practiced. Shira Chadasha, a new song, Shipchu Gulim, Leshimcha al Sfat Hayam, Yachad Kulam, Hodu Vehimlichu Va'amru.
Adonai Imloch Leolam Va'aleh. To Yisrael, Kuma Be'ezrat Yisrael, Mo Aleinu Adonai Tzvaot Shemo. Mo Aleinu Adonai Tzvaot Shemo. Kadosh Yisrael, Baruch Atah Adonai, Ra Yisrael.
Move to the tefillah, the Amidah, our standing prayer, the prayer offered 3 times a day, replacing the thrice daily sacrifice at the temple. So let's stand when you are ready.
Adonai Shabbat Tiftachu fi Agitei Latecha. Adonai Shabbat Tiftachu fi Agitei Latecha.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim v'Konei Hakol, v'Zocher Chasdei Avot v'Imohot, U'Mevi Gula Livnei v'Nehem, Lama'an Shamo b'Yahava, Melech Hosea Moshiach Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham Vezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechaye Metim atah Rav LaHoshia, Mashiv HaRuach u'Morid HaGeshem, Mazriach HaShemesh u'Morid HaTel.
Mechalkel Chaim B'Chesed, Mekayem Metim B'Rachamim Rabim. Somek Novim Profet Olim Umatir Asurim Makayem Emunato Mishenei Afar Milhamona Bal Gadurot Uvidom Elav Melech Meimid U'Machayeh U'Matzliach Yeshua.
V'ne'eman atah lahachayot metim, Baruch atah Adonai, B'chayei hametim. We sanctify your name on earth as in the prophet's vision. The hosts of heaven sing your praise above, for so it is written.
Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzuvaot, Melech kol haaretz kevodo.
Kovodo malei olam.
Baruch kevod Adonai mimkomo.
Mimkomacha malkeinu, tofia v'timloch aleinu, ki machakim anachnu lach.
Imloch Adonai leolam, Elohai Tzion, Tov Adon, Hallelujah. Tov Adon, Tov Adon, Tov Adon, Anidon Lecha, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Kedushacha Nakdish, Tov Adon, Tov Adon, Tov Adon, Anidon Lecha, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Kedushacha Nakdish, V'shivcha Eloheinu, Lo Yamush Leolam Va'ed, Ki El Melech Gadol, Ki El Melech Gadol, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tov Adon, Tov Adon, Tov Adon, Nagid Gol Lecha, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Ulenetzach Netzachim, Kedushacha Nakdish.
Baruch atah Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh. Let's sit down as we mark Shabbat.
Yismachu b'malachutacha, Shomrei, 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 Shabbat HaKoreh, Oneg Shabbat. Yismachu b'malachutacha, Shomrei, 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 Shabbat HaKoreh, Oneg Shabbat. Mekadoshi Shuvi Shabbat, Kulan Yisbu, V'yitangu mitu v'cha Shabbat. Yismachu b'malachutacha, Shomrei, 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 Shabbat HaKoreh, Oneg Shabbat. Yismachu b'malachutacha, Shomrei, 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 Shabbat HaKoreh, Oneg Shabbat. V'hashvi'i ratzita bo v'kiddush lo Shabbat, Emdat yamim, v'to karata Shabbat. Yismachu b'malachutacha, Shomrei, 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 Shabbat HaKoreh, Oneg Shabbat. Yismachu b'malachutacha, Shomrei, 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 Shabbat HaKoreh, Oneg Shabbat. Zecher L'maseh Bereshit Shabbat. Zecher L'maseh Bereshit Shabbat. Yismachu b'malachutacha, Shomrei, 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 Shabbat HaKoreh, Oneg Shabbat. Yismachu b'malachutacha, Shomrei, 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 Shabbat HaKoreh, Oneg Shabbat.
Baruch atah Adonai Makadesh HaShabbat. Yesterday, last night, I reminded us that I visited Monty Bixer yesterday afternoon, and we talked about prayer. And I said, we're allowed to sing now. And he said, which was right, I sang anyway, even when we weren't allowed to. And I wonder now, with this next paragraph, the blessing over our prayers and how we hope our prayers have been received, or what transformative quality they have when we offer prayers as a community. So please join me in Hebrew or English, actually. Ritzei Adonai Eloheinu bi'amcha Yisrael, u'tefilatam bi'ahava tekabel, u'tehila ratzon tamid avodat Yisrael amecha. Baruch ata Adonai, she'otecha levadecha b'yera na'avod. Modim anachnu lach, she'ata hu Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu le'olam va'ed. Tzur hayenu, magen yishenu, ata hu ledor vador, nodeh lecha saper tehilatecha, al hayenu hamsarim biyadecha, v'al nishmotenu habakudot lach, v'al nisecha shebachol yom imanu, v'al niflotecha v'tovotecha, shebachol eit erev v'voker v'tzoharayim. Baruch ata Adonai, hatov shimcha, Ulacha na'er lohodot.
Sing shalom, tova uvracha. Sing shalom.
Baruch atah Adonai, oseh hashalom. Let's take a few moments for silent prayer and reflection. fourth line of the prayer on page 146 talks of Patach libi b'toratecha, open my heart to your teachings. And the Torah portion today talks so much of opening our hands, of living aware of and connected to those in need. But here we're reminded that we always have the opportunity to open our hearts and whatever that might reveal for us. Patach libi.
Shalom Nevroma, Yahweh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'al Kol Bnei Adam. Say Shalom Nevroma, Yahweh Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'al Kol
Let's turn to Kriyat HaTorah, the Torah service, on page 481.
Ein kamocha va'Elohim Adonai ve'ein dema'asecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha b'chol
I'm going to ask us to stand. We have the scroll out already to minimize contact, but have a moment of looking and being aware of the ark and where the scroll has come from before we read from its words.
Adonai melech, Adonai malach, Adonai imloch, le'olam va'ed, Adonai oz le'amo yitain, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo.
Onoramama Shamoyakta.
Lepa Adonai, Adulav Agura, V'Hatiferet HaNetzachot, Kipol V'Shamayim U'La'aretz, Lepa Adonai, Amam Lavan, V'Hamid Naseh,
Let's sit down. You know, this morning as I was getting up, I thought I overused the word extraordinary. It's one of my favourite words in my vocabulary, but truly, I just couldn't think of another word to describe this week's portion. We are slowly creeping to the end of Deuteronomy, to the end of Torah. And here we are in Parashat Re'eh, which means look, see, pay attention to. Lirot in modern Hebrew and Ivrit literally means to see. And what are we asked to see in the first line of this portion? See, I set before you the choices of blessing and curse, of life and death. Therefore, it's up to you to choose. And obviously, God is encouraging, choose life and everything that is within it. But the piece of the portion we're reading that must be connected to the idea of look and see and choose life is the idea of the Shemitah year, of the 7th year, of this Shabbat, of Shabbats, of years, where you must let go of debts. Let go of debts and release those who work for you or who are enslaved to you. But this tiny section of Torah, as I find so often, seems to anticipate a modern sensibility for human frailty that shocks me every time. This tiny section of Torah challenges us. It suggests that the Nochri, the foreigner, who is not a ger, someone who is foreign but lives amongst the community, but a Nochri, someone who literally travels through, does not get protected by Shemitah. It's an uncomfortable line. Rashi chooses not to comment. Ramban Nachmanides, Spanish fantastic commentator, often looking for the more mystical reading, suggests this is a positive commandment to think about who you do business with and to pull you back from the outside world. All uncomfortable. But our own Hertz, Chief Rabbi Hertz, suggests that really focus on the nature of the person, of the traveling person. Nonetheless, I find it troubling to read. Anyone who is within your community, your brother, your sister, your neighbor, of course, they must benefit from the Shemitah laws, but not the Nochri. Another moment that I urge you to look out for is the word Hishamer, which means beware. Beware lest you recognize in yourself that you are trying to avoid the Shemitah year by not lending any money in the time that approaches to it, so that you'll be free and not have to indulge or be commanded or be responsible to let go of debts. How extraordinary that Torah anticipates that all of us in human nature will find ways to look after ourselves, even if it means limiting, diminishing the generosity that we are required to offer. So I will, of course, read Hebrew and then translate. I feel for this one even more the sense of Ezra and Nehemiah, the two prophets, leaders, judges that brought the people back to Israel after the first exile, after the first temple was destroyed back from Babylon, and pulled them together at the Watergate and read Torah, or Proto-Torah. We think it was probably a version of Devarim, of Deuteronomy. And the people cried. And Ezra and Nehemiah insisted not only on reading the words in the language, which we think was some kind of Proto-Hebrew, not only to do that, but to make sure that they translated the words and that the words were understood. And I feel that generational commandment for us, that actually what are we doing here if not to wrestle with and understand the words of Torah, pull them into our generation, into 2021 and all it means for us. So delighted to call up Chris right now. Ya'amod Morenu. Yaakov Mordechai ben Avraham levarech et haTorah.
Baruch hu et Adonai ha'mavorach.
Baruch Adonai hamavorach leolam va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bacha banu michol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai notein ha'Torah.
Amen. I'm going to let you hold on if
Yep.
you would like. Okay. So we're in Deuteronomy chapter 15, verses 1 to 15. Miketz sheva shanim ta'aseh shmita v'zeh davar hashmita shemot kol ba'al mashe yado asher yashe bere'ehu lo yigos et ra'ehu ve'et echav ki kara shmita ladonai et hanochri tigos va'asher yeh lecha et achicha tashmit yadacha אפס כי לא יהיה בך אביון כי יברכך אדוני בארץ אשר אדוני אליך נותן לך נחלה לרשתה. רק אם שמוע תשמע בקול אדוני אלוהיך, לשמוע לעשות את כל המצווה הזאת אשר אנוכי מצווך היום כי אדוני אלוהיך. ברכך כאשר דיבר לך והעבדת גויים רבים ואתה לא תעבת ומשלת בגויים רבים ובך לא ימשלו כי יהיה בך אביון מאחד אחיך באחד שעריך בארצך אשר אדוני אלוהיך נותן לך, לא תאמץ את לבבך, ולא תקפוץ את ידך מאחיך האביון, כי פתוח תפתח את ידך, לא תאבטנו די מחזורו אשר יחזור לו. השומר לך פן יהיה דיבר אם השמר לך פן יהיה דבר אם לבבך בליעל לאמור קרבה שנת השמיטה וראה עיניך באחיך האביון ולא תיתן לו וקרא אליך אל אדוני והיה בך חטא נתון תיתן לו ולא ירא לבבך בתיתך לו כי בגלל הדבר הזה יברך אדוני אלוהיך בכל מעשיך ובכל משלח ידך כי לא יחדל אביון מקרב הארץ על כן אנוכי מצווך לאמור פתוח תפתח את ידך לאחיך לעונך ולאביונך בארצך כי ימכור לך אחיך העברי או העברייה ועבדך 6 שנים ובשנה השביעית תשלחנו חופשי מעמך וכי תשלחנו חופשי מעמך לא תשלחנו ריקם הענק תעניק לו מצונך ומגרנך ומקרבך אשר ברכה אדוני אלוהיך, תיתן לו, וזכרת כי עבד היית בארץ מצרים. ויבטחך אדוני אלוהיך, על כן אנוכי מצווך את הדבר הזה היום, והיה כי יאמר אליך, לא אצא מעמך, כי אהבה את ביתך. So let me translate and bring some meaning to this. At the end of 7 years you shall make for yourself a year of Shemitah, and this shall be the thing of Shemitah, that every owner, as it were, every owner or debt collector who owns any debt shall release them from their neighbor, and shall not take back any pledge or debt from their neighbor who is their brother, who is their brother. And this is called a Shemitah to God, a year of rest to God. But for the Nochri, the foreigner, as I reminded us, the foreigner, you should still take back from them. Hertz says, it doesn't say you must, but you can take back from them. They still owe you money. But from your brother, you have to keep to the Shemitah year and take nothing from them. And so it should be that there should be no poor among you. And there should be no poor among you. And God therefore will bless you in the land that God has given to you to come into in order to inherit. But it is only if you listen truly to God's voice and to keep this particular commandment that I, and here we hear the words of Moses or God, that I command you today. And therefore I will surely bless you by the words that I have given you. And you should therefore not lend, you will be lending a great deal of money to many nations, and actually you might be able to rule over many nations, but you will not borrow from any nations, and you will not be ruled over by any nations. So we see this sense of reward. If you keep to this, if you behave well, this is the reward. I want to remind you that last night I spoke, and I'll speak a little bit more about the idea of the acronym of Elul, the month that we're going into, Aleph, Lamed, Vav, Lamed. And we talked about Ani Li, V'dodi Li. But there is another idea that comes from the Megillat Esther, Ish l're'ehu umatanot le'evyonim. So that the month of Elul reminds us of that commandment in the Megillah, which says a person must give gifts to their neighbors and to those who are poor or in need. And it reminds me, Beverly, of what you've instituted in our community of gifts to those in need, of which we're planning for Rosh Hashanah. So this reminds us of this time as well. So this, it shall be for you, and there's a contradiction because we hear this idea that there shall be no poor among you, and then later on it says when there are poor among you. So commentators suggest if we follow God's voice, if we create the Shemitah year, if we stick to it and call upon ourselves to act on the generosity, then perhaps that will diminish the poor amongst us. So it shall be for you that when there are poor among you, and one of your brothers or sisters or those that live in your gates or in your country are poor, you need to give to them. You must not close your heart or indeed close your hand, but rather you need to give to the poor that is amongst all your people. You must open your hand to them, and you must give to them all that they need. Literally give to them anything they lacked. I noticed one commentary yesterday that said, literally, if they need donkeys to ride on and servants to run behind them, if that's what they're used to, that's what you have to give them, which seems quite a tall order, actually. And it says, but beware of the voice that might be lodged in your heart, the bad idea in your heart. Literally talks of the evil eye that might be lodged in your heart, that might allow you to think, the Shemitah year is approaching, maybe I should stop giving and stop lending money. But this is bad, and if you do this to your brother or sister or the poor that live amongst you, you must not do this. Rather, you should give to them so that they don't have to call out in need. Calling out in need would bring sin upon you. Rather, you should give to them so that you do not harbor evilness in your heart, but you should give to them. And for this, because of this very thing, God will bless you. This surely brings us back to the first line of the portion. Let yourself choose the blessing of life. For this very thing, you shall receive the blessing from God on all that you do and any time you reach out your hand to do anything. Because this is a good thing. And with this, you will diminish the poor amongst you in the land that you are in. And we're reminded, God saying, I command you this day to open your hand, to reach out to your brother and to the poor that live amongst you, and to give within your land. And then we have the commandment of what to do if you own or if Hebrew slaves are owned. If someone has bought for themselves, if you buy for yourself a Hebrew, an Israelite slave or female slave who works for you 6 years, then on the 7th year you must surely release them to go free from your people. And when you release them, don't release them with nothing. I love this postscript. You must not release them free, chofshi, when they have nothing. You must send them out furnished with goods from your flocks, with goods from your vineyards, with goods from your threshing floor, that they should go out, and therefore you will be blessed by God, because you are giving them all they need. And thus you need to remember that you were a slave in Egypt. This is why you were a slave in Egypt, and God freed you from there, and this is why I command you this thing.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet v'chayei olam nata batocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. And Amisha Baruch to you, Chris. Thank you. Very strong right hand as we're going to raise. So do stand up if you are able to.
Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah. Baruch Shenatan Torah, Torah. Le'amo Yisrael b'kedushato.
You sit down, Chris. I'm going to let you.
Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'yishtachavu l'har kosho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'yishtachavu l'har kosho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'yishtachavu l'har kosho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu v'yishtachavu l'har kosho.
So delighted to call up Beverly and Barry in anticipation of their anniversary next week to read Haftarah during these weeks of consolation from Tisha B'Av to Rosh Hashanah. We have Haftarot, often from the book of Isaiah, but those Rabbi David Hulbert actually works on our lectionary and expands it so we get to taste the words from the Ketuvim, from the last section of Tanakh. So we get the words of Proverbs today, and they really, the connection between the words of Proverbs to what we've just heard is, all of it is about how to make sense of our life, how to be the best we can be. Proverbs is full of aphorisms and advice, how to be the wisest, the best that we can be. So let's juxtapose the words of Proverbs, traditionally thought to be written by the same writer who wrote Ecclesiastes, but we're not sure. Could it have been Samuel? Could it have been Solomon? So we hear the words of Proverbs and put them next to the words of Devarim. I'll move back and free you up here.
We praise you, eternal sovereign of the universe. You sanctify us by your commandments and enjoin us to read from the holy writings.
So the version I'm reading is a slightly gender-neutral version, so it might be slightly different from that's put up on the screens for those of you at home. To the humans belong the plans of the heart, but from the eternal comes a proper answer of the tongue. All a person's ways seem pure to them, but motives are weighed by the eternal. Commit to the eternal whatever you do, and God will establish your plans. The eternal works out everything to its proper end, even the wicked for a day of disaster. The eternal detests all the proud of heart. Be sure of this, they will not go unpunished. Through love and faithfulness, sin is atoned for. Through the fear of the eternal, evil is avoided. When the eternal takes pleasure in anyone's way, God causes their enemies to make peace with them. Better a little with righteousness than much gain with injustice. In their hearts, humans plan their course, but the eternal establishes their steps. The lips of a king speak as an oracle, and his mouth does not betray justice. Honest scales and balances belong to the eternal. All the weights in the bag are of God's making. Kings detest wrongdoing, for a throne is established through righteousness. Kings take pleasure in honest lips. They value the one who speaks what is right. A king's wrath is a messenger of death, but the wise will appease it. When a king's face brightens, it means life. His favour is like a rain cloud in spring. How much better to get wisdom than gold, to get insight rather than silver. The highway of the upright avoids evil. Those who guard their ways preserve their lives.
We praise you, eternal one, our God, sovereign of the universe. You've been our source of strength and righteousness throughout the ages, the faithful God, whose word is deed, whose every word is true and just. For the Torah, for the privilege of worship, for the holy writings, this is the Sabbath day which you, eternal one, have given us for holiness and rest, for honour and beauty. We thank and praise you, O eternal one, our God. May all the living praise your name now and forever. We praise you, O God, for the holiness of the Sabbath.
Amen. You can just stand on the steps and I will come back. So I just really wanted to offer a blessing to you today, Barry and Beverly. Feels like you've been part of this congregation all your life and you haven't. It's only been 2 years? 2 years. It's extraordinary. So this moment today deserves marking. The path of life, we know, is often unpredictable. Yet 32 years ago, next Friday, I think, you pledged to one another that you would weather life's challenges together. So Barry and Beverly, we know that no one is promised a life without hardship or pain, but we do know that whatever obstacles you have encountered and faced in the world have been more easily managed by being side by side with each other. Your children, Natasha and Ian, are a living testament to your love. You've established for them a firm foundation of compassion and ethics, and that will endure as a legacy. And next week, Natasha will be singing and leading song here on the bima with us as part of the congregation. May God continue to watch over you, sheltering you by day, bringing you rest and comfort at night. We thank God who in love has allowed you to reach this sacred moment. And let us all say Amen. And let's offer a shehechianu for these 32 years. Mazal tov to you. So we go now to prayers for our congregation, and I call on Paula to hop on up here, and I'll back up again with my mask.
Eternal God, we ask your blessing on our Queen Elizabeth and all the royal family, as well as those who govern our country. Guide them and all who govern our country with a spirit of wisdom and compassion, so that they care for the citizen and the stranger, and bring benefit to all the inhabitants of our country and the world. Bless all our brothers and sisters of the house of Israel. Bless our congregation and all its members. Be with those who seek your presence, and all who are in need of healing, spiritual or physical. Let them know that you are near to comfort and sustain them. May peace exist in the state of Israel soon and in our time. May you, eternal God, grant blessing to her, established as an age-old dream and home to the oppressed. May its leaders and citizens be inspired with a faithfulness to the aims of its founders, and may the country be imbued with the prophetic ideals of liberty and justice always. May this Shabbat renew our energy to build and sustain a better world, and to deepen our gratitude of so much that surrounds us. And let us say, Amen.
Amen. And as Monday is the month of Elul coming in, we mark it with our prayer now set to Dean's own melody for the new month.
Yehi ratzon milfanecha, Adonai Eloheinu, Velohei Avotenu. Shetchadesh aleinu et hachodesh haba, v'titei lanu Chaim arukim, Chaim shel shalom, Chaim shel tova, Chaim shel bracha, Chaim shel parnasa, Chaim shel hilutz atzamot, Chaim sheyesh bahem yirat chet, Chaim shein bahem dusha uklima, Chaim shetevanu ahavat Torah v'yirat shamayim, Chaim shein
month of Elul, which begins on Yom Sheni, on Monday. May it grant to each one of us a long life of peace, of welfare and blessing, a life of prosperity and health, a life guided by conscience, unmarred by self-reproach or shame, a life exalted by the love of Torah, reverence for the divine, a life in which the longings of our hearts may be fulfilled for good. May it be the will of the Holy One ever to be praised, that it bring for us, the whole house of Israel, life and peace, happiness and joy, deliverance and consolation. V'nomar, Amen. Yahallelu et Shem Adonai ki nizgav shamo lavado.
Hodo aretz v'shamayim v'yarem beren ne'amot te'ila l'chol chasidav livnei Yisrael am kerovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah.
Ki lecha tov natati lechem, torati al ta'azov.
Et chaim li lamachazinim ba v'tom lecha meusha Ramecha darcheinu v'chol netivotecha shalom. Shivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu v'kedem Chadesh Yameinu
So a book I recently read was by the American writer Joan Didion, as she recalled the year before and after her daughter died. She called it Blue Nights. And she thinks throughout the book of what she has seen, noticed and remembered during the life of her daughter. And she writes these words: in theory, mementos serve to bring back the moment, but in fact they serve only to make clear how inadequately I appreciated the moment when I was there and when it was there. How inadequately I appreciated the moment when it was here is something else I could never afford to see at the time. Ra'eh is our portion, inviting us to look, to see, to take note of. With the words at the start of the portion, as I said earlier, Re'eh anochi noten lifnehem hayom bracha uklala. Behold, I set before you today blessing and curse. This week, as I've said, this Shabbat also heralds the new month of Elul, the month that precedes Tishri, full of the high holy days, the period and season of forgiveness and reflection that requires and asks of us, what are we meant to see and take note of? What is in our life that we must look at? What opportunities could we take to pay attention to? As I reminded us last night, I am my beloved and my beloved is mine is the acronym made out of the letters of the month of Elul. It captures the intimacy, the possibilities, the opportunities for love and consciousness in this coming month. Really seeing And we know that personal reflection can be a hard and tiring thing to do. But seeing the month of Elul as a love song between ourselves and however we encounter God keeps it more as a possibility for us. Why is the idea of God closer to us at this time of year? Because we are willing to be open-hearted and loving and look and wake up to the reality of our lives. The traditional custom of Elul is that we hear the blast of shofar every day. Instead, this month you will receive a message every morning from Monday morning, each day of Elul, asking a question, giving a pause and reflection, something to read, take note of, be inspired by, to help you in your process to get to Rosh Hashanah. Wake up to the reality of our lives. Alan Liu, great rabbi, conservative rabbi, who wrote one of the most extraordinary books calling us as a Jewish people to look at this season of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur as truly an opportunity for self-reflection and growth, suggests we must set aside each day of Elul, time to look at ourselves, to engage in self-evaluation, self-judgment, to engage truly in a cheshbon hanefesh, a spiritual accounting. I heard a class once where the teacher asked children who might have been the most underrated, underappreciated scientist of the 20th century. Many guessed all names of scientists, but Freud was the answer she was looking for, because she taught it was Freud who encouraged us to investigate and look at what is not easy to see. That is what the month of Elul offers to us. Whether we look at people who've touched, influenced us, who we've lost or indeed still have, who and what is it that raises us to be the people that we want to be? The lawyer Nazir Afzal remembered last week, I heard him say, remembered that as his mother was dying, he visited her a great deal in Birmingham and massaged her feet and her legs, and noticed for the very first time how tiny her feet were. Her feet were a size 3, and yet he recalled he had seen her as a giant all his life, a giant of capability and courage, and yet in those last few weeks of her life, he noticed exactly who she was. What is it we are required to look at and see and remember in this month of Elul to make the most of the introspection that this season calls us to? Rabbi Alan Liu, who I've said, spiritual leader of a congregation in San Francisco for many years, dying suddenly just 15 years ago. Conservative trained rabbi who also established the world's first Jewish meditation center, describes himself as a Zen rabbi, wrote this book. This is real, and you are completely unprepared for the journey into the High Holy Days. He tells the story one day of sitting in his living room one afternoon and hearing the sound of a basketball bouncing outside, and unexpectedly breaking out into tears. Not typically moved by sounds of bouncing balls, he realized that the sound took him back to a time when he would play with his father, who had died 15 years earlier, on an asphalt court that his father had built for them near their house. Rabbi Liu was a typical American child raised on watching and playing sports, but his father was born in Poland to a family of war refugees. He didn't know how to play. He'd fling the ball wildly towards the hoop and dribble off his feet. His father was stubborn and competed fiercely in everything he did. Yet, Rabbi Liu writes about his father that when it came to playing with his son, he regularly humiliated himself, laughing at his own ineptitude, at his own self-deprecation. Sitting in his living room that day, Rabbi Liu heard the sound of the ball outside his window and understood that his father was really only fully genuine there on the court. And he wrote, "It was the only time I ever knew him to be comfortable saying, This is me with all my limitations, with all my loss and suffering that my life has dealt me. This is exactly who I am. And Liu wrote, I could see that open, radiant, laughing face of his, transformed by his own self-forgiveness of his own limitations. So Liu was inspired to write this book about what this season could be for us. Self-forgiveness and acceptance is an essential act of the High Holy Day season, whether we see it in our relationships with others, alive and no longer alive, being able to look and see what is there. We are also invited to read Psalm 27 through each day of Elul. These words of Psalm 27 reverberate around the idea of looking and noticing. One thing I ask of God, only that I seek to live in the house of God all the days of my life, to look and gaze upon the pleasantness of God, to frequent God's sanctuary. So on this journey, as we hope our soul will awaken to itself, we move from recollection, from memory of those who have touched and continue to touch us in our lives, to the world that we live in now, hopeful that the ability to notice, to see, to be awake will allow us to arrive at this season ready to make the most of it. It is this season, this journey from denial to awareness, self-deception to judgment, and then to self-forgiveness, is the snapshot the Jewish people pull out every single autumn of the great journey of all human beings, and all of us make that journey across the world every year of our lives. So I hope it is a good one for you, and I hope the month of Elul provides an opportunity for reflection, for thought, for a sense of awareness and consciousness from just taking that first look. Shabbat Shalom. Let us turn to page 520, Aleinu, that calls us to look at the future of the world that we might choose to contribute to. And thinking about the future, look out, look into your inbox, your email, look on our synagogue Facebook page for a message that will come to you every day through the next month.
Shamayim
And it has been said, the eternal God shall rule over all the earth. On that day, the eternal God shall be one and known to be one. Let's turn to Kaddish and to those who are marking yahrzeits at this time. As I said last night, I feel that we are still very much in the Shloshim, the 30 days after the death of Miriam Bixer, and we'll keep remembering her in our services. Strength and love to Monty as he recalls and remembers her and moves through these first few days of grief. The yahrzeits that fall this Shabbat: Rose Khan, mother of Barry J., Mickey Maxwell, sister of Barry J., Arnold Goldstein, father of Anne Goldstein, and Clive Winston, father of Penny Brailsford. Zichronam livracha. May their memories be for a blessing, and may those who recall and remember their loved ones be comforted in their loss, as we say the words of the Kaddish with and for them. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, b'mal divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, magala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mavorach Leolam Amel Maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'av v'yitramam v'yitnaseh. V'yithada v'yitale v'talal Shmei Dekudisha Brichu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbachata v'nechemata. Da'amiram b'yama v'imru amen. Yehei Shlama Rabbah min Shamaya. V'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol b'nei Adam, v'imru amen. Let's sit down as we go into Kiddush together. Announcements are very slight as we are in the summer quiet months. So I can't even think, but someone will remind me of something to remind you of. But let us go straight to Kiddush. I think, oh no, what am I talking about? What am I talking about? Adon Olam. Adon Olam. I'm clearly very much in summer mode, aren't I? Yeah, clearly in summer mode. Adon Olam. Which, although we're so used to Adon Olam, and we kind of see it just as the kind of end of the service, it is one of the most beautiful of the piyutim, of the medieval songs. And if you just think about that last verse, into your hand I place my soul, asleep, awake, for you are near, and with my soul, my body too, you are my God, I shall not fear.
Adon Olam Hashem alav b'terem ol yitzir nivra v'yet nasa v'ketzon kol azay melech shemo nikra v'yacharei v'kot hakol v'lanu yimloch nora v'ru hayam v'ru omed v'ru yi v'tivara v'ru echad v'ein sheni v'hamshilo v'hakbira v'ni reshit v'ni tachlit v'lo ha'az v'ha'misra v'ru eli v'chaim oli v'tucher li v'etzara v'ru nisi v'anos li v'nat mosi v'yom ekra v'yano avnid ruchi v'eti sham v'ayira v'im ruchi v'yati Adonai v'lo ira.
Thank you, Dean. So beautiful. So Adon Olam, anonymous, I should have said. We think probably 13th, 14th century Spain, but anonymous to us of who wrote it. So let's stand for Kiddush. Just again, a huge mazal tov to Beverly and Barry, and just good for us all to be together.
V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, la'asot et ha-Shabbat, l'dorotam berit olam, beini uvein b'nei Yisrael, oti le'olam, ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai, et ha-shamayim ve'et haaretz, Uvayom hashvi shavat vayinafash Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Borei buri hagafen Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Lovely to see you.